In this tub is a Boss PH-3 phase shifter pedal, which if you go back a few months on my channel you'll find a video about. This is one I bought, spares or repairs. It had got a blown up 3.3 volt regulator, and I attempted to remove the regulation circuitry almost by brute force because it had blown up to the point where it had welded itself to the circuit board. But I attempted to remove that entire circuitry and botching my own 3.3 volt regulator to see if we could get it up and running. While I did manage to get power to it, and I did observe some activity between the CPU and the DSP chips, there was a clock signal that was latched up, and that clock signal only exists between the two chips. One chip generates it and the other reads it, and there's nothing else that comes into that circuit. Unfortunately, that was latched high, so it indicated that this pedal at some point, I guess, has had an overvoltage condition, and it had not only of course blown up the regulator, but it's damaged one of the chips. So without sourcing another pedal for replacement chips, it was completely end of life. Now I've actually managed to find another. This one turned up on eBay, again a cheap buy it now, all in pieces. It's missing some bits, but crucially the listing did say all the internals are there. I've also got a bag with bolts and the back plate and a few bits and pieces as well. I've only had a quick cursory look at this. I did find a battery inside the battery well, which is best before 2016. So I did take that out just as a precaution, but we will test that. But crucially, when I had a look at this board, there is no damage to the 3.3 volt regulator, but there is a capacitor here that's got a bit of a suspicious dent in it, which is kind of weird, and the other one here looks slightly scuffed. So I don't know the exact working condition of this. It was just sold as faulty as parts. Haven't tried it or anything yet, but I'm going to aim to try and cobble together parts between the two. I think I'll use the casing of the old one because the label and everything's there on the top, on the pot board, and see if I can resurrect it and see if I can get one that's running using parts from the two. They are identical boards. I noticed that one's got a little bit more adhesive around some of the wiring than the other, but they are identical. So they are a little bit difficult to work on these, in the sense that the wiring being soldered to the board like this means that you can't kind of remove it. It's just sort of stuck flapping around while you try and work on these boards, unless you start desoldering things. It'd be nice if these were on a connector, but then that would of course push the cost up. Much the same for the control board here. It's just on a ribbon cable, so when you take them apart it just kind of flops around. That's the only thing I've noticed so far. I don't know if you can tell on the video, but if I can perhaps get that in a little bit closer, if you can see there is a sort of weird dent in it. I'm not sure, that looks a bit suspicious, but I don't see on first impression anything else. There's a bit more adhesive around some of the wiring than there is on the other one, but I think that's just something or nothing really. But I certainly haven't seen any other obvious damage so far. So I'd be curious to do a couple of basic tests first. I think we should do the usual of checking if there's any shorts or anything across the power before we put any power to it, and perhaps check that as well. I will pull up the circuit diagrams that I had. If I remember right, the one I had for the PH-3 was a little low quality blurry copy, but I had a clear PDF of a very similar pedal, which between the two I was able to work out what I needed with regards to the power circuitry and whatnot. So let's do that. So to trip the power switch in the jack socket, because you have to plug something into them for them to turn the power on, we need to put a blank plug in one of these sockets, and I think it's going to be this one because it's got 3 wires from it, so that would in effect turn the pedal on. And I've just got a battery connector that comes out to a barrel jack there, so we'll do a quick test on there to see if we've got any shorts or anything. Let's just zoom out there so you can see that. So let's just check that this is open. Oh, dead short. Interesting. Let's just check if it breaks with the power off. No. Let's have a look at the barrel jack. Is that the fault? It's got a dead short across it. Barrel jack's got some sort of signs of residue on it, but it doesn't look physically damaged. For an idiot check, let's just take the older one and just do the same test. Obviously it's missing some parts, but let's do the same test on that. No, that one's wide open, as it should be. Okay, do we have perhaps blown protection diodes? So I believe these two at the top, D2 and D3, on Boss boards. I believe those two are the protection diodes. You got short there? Would that be our fault? Again, let's just double check the diodes on this one. .2. Okay. Okay, that's curious because they don't look damaged. They don't look blown up or anything for sure. A bit unusual that both of them would short out like that, but then I need to look at where they are in the circuit, because if they're across the same rail, of course that's going to show the same short. Okay, I realised I was making a mistake there. Without a plug in the DC socket there, the contacts aren't opened in there, and I had not got a jack connector in there again to close the circuit. So if I check now, they're checking out okay. And if I check them in reverse, open, so it's not those. I still really don't like the look of this capacitor. I'm curious to see if I can get anything across that. No, we don't have a short across there. Okay, we'll keep digging. I've been going over the schematic with this, and it's a bit of a perplexing one, this. I wondered if there was some sort of fault in the DC socket, and when I had a real good look around this, I noticed some sort of residue around the board that's definitely not there on the other one. I'm beginning to suspect this has been given a drink. It doesn't kind of smell of anything, usually if it's beer or blackcurrant or something, as has happened before. You can smell it. I can't smell it, but there is an odd residue on there that I've started to clean off. There's a bit of a kind of fuzzy solder joint as well on this diode. So I've got my suspicions that, yeah, there's something wrong there. I think what I'm going to do is put some flux on this DC socket, get the wide tip on my desoldering gun, and get this jack socket off and see if there's anything underneath that. Getting rid of the DC socket has presented some issues in that it removes the switch that's internal to the DC socket, but having tested the DC socket separately, it's fine. But still trying to make the connection back to where the power should come into the DC socket or from the battery, I was hitting shorts again. Now, again, looking at the circuit and looking where the 9V goes through and comes into this, if you can see it with that in the way, L1, which is a choke coil, little inductor coil that feeds the power into the 3.3V regulator. Found an interesting discovery. There is no short south of this section here. There's definitely no internal short. With the current limited power supply, if I just touch this to the input pin of this inductor, watch what happens. It lights up, and if I turn the switch on and off, something's running. So it draws 40 milliamps as well when it's in that state, which again seems about right for the idle state. So south of that it's working now. As we said, I have a suspicion that it's been given a drink. This residue from the adhesive there is really not helping me, but I'm going to kind of work around that. I've got a suspicion it might be this double capacitor here, which is an EMI suppression capacitor. I reckon it could be that. I'm tempted to clean this up a bit more, put the socket back in, and probably get hot air and Captain tape and remove that, because we know the protection diodes are fine, but it's this I've got my suspicions on. If it's had a drink and there's residue up here, it's right in the firing line, and I can't fault anything else that side of it. So something definitely north of this capacitor and something around here is at fault. Well, there's no short there now. Let's solder the socket back on. Just before I did that, further confusion has just been answered. There is a crack in the board. Maybe get my torch. I don't know how visible I can make this to the camera. I don't know, you might actually be able to see it. I wonder if this would work. But just across here, there was a weird line. As I say, the residue from the glue is not helping me. But this board is cracked. I should have a dead short between this side of diode 3 and the positive of this capacitor. And I was getting all kinds of erratic readings before I cleaned it several times, and eventually it settled around 600 kiloohms, which doesn't make sense at all. And when looking closely, yeah, there is a crack. So I think if it hasn't just been given a drink, but I think it's had a knock. It's been kicked or something, or stood on, and there is a crack in this board. So I think I'm going to have to get this glue off, scratch some of this away, and I think this can probably be repaired rather with possibly, I don't know about a solder bridge because it's kind of round at the connection. I've got to have a look at this. Doing my best to make this come across on camera, but do you see where that number 10 is? You can see the crack across that track. That's the positive supply coming out the back of the diode and going down towards that capacitor C36 where it should connect. And you can see that crack across that track. So we've cleared a short, but the power isn't getting any further. So let's now check that between the capacitor, positive of the capacitor and the diodes, we have a short. We do. Now is it going to light up? Yes. Does the switch work? Yes. Okay. Progress. Okay, so after a lunch break and after putting a little bit of super glue just over this crack and hoping that it would just wick down to strengthen this a little bit, I've done the bodge wire. This wire that's tacked on here to the positive, where I removed that tiny little EMI filter capacitor, it's kind of a weird component, that thing. There should actually be a short across the whole component, but not in this direction. So I have actually got to take this wire that I've been using as the positive feed from the power supply, temporarily just tack it onto the other side of that, just so that it does actually close that gap. I'll try and show on the schematic exactly what I mean. But yeah, I've just got to put a little tack in there, and then I think I'm going to solder on the jack socket, which I've actually cleaned. I've put through my ultrasonic cleaner just to make sure there isn't any weird drink residue or anything in it, but it seems to be okay. So I think I'm actually just going to basically put that back in and just lightly tack solder it, just in case I have to remove it again. So let's do that to start off with. That's cool for now. I should do it for now. And having done that, let's just check this time. If there's a short, no, there is no longer a short. And now with the power connected, it lights up and draws 40 milliamps, as it always has. So that now probably works. I've noticed I have a brown wire that's broken off of one of the connectors there. I think that one, from the big handle so much. So that will need soldering on, or we won't really get any sound. So a very quick lash up here just to try and do some audio tests, and those audio tests aren't going very far because I haven't got any at all. I've got a signal going in 1 volt RMS, 500 Hz signal, and I'm starting to trace it through the board. I've got the scope on. It is popping when I turn it on and off. I don't know if you can hear that from my amp. So there's a pop when it turns on and off, so the output's working, but the input somewhere is probably stuck in mute, it's not getting through. There is an 8 volts and a 4 volts that come again from the power supply that I just want to check are present. I have already checked, but just to show. That's our 8 volts, and on this little one that's our 4 volts. So again, the power supply is working correctly. I need to see if that's coming through. Find somewhere where we should find that 4 volts. Yeah, it's been ripped off the board. There's the remains of the pad stuck to the brown wire. Again, this adhesive's not really helping me. Okay, there is a tiny bit of the copper exposed. Unfortunately, I haven't got a blade in my fine scalpel. There's a chance I can expose some of this copper. I'm getting this plating off the top of it. See if I can make a join there, and I will need to reinforce it. That's the bodgiest join ever, but I'm not going to leave it like that. The output jack on these, by the way, grounds through the casing, so there's only one wire that actually goes to the output jack. As soon as you unscrew it from the casing, you lose the ground, so you have to use a crocodile clip to the ground tab on the socket in order to give it a ground. Now again, it's a lash up. Sig gen's on. Down pull. And another wire's broken off. Oh. Oh. Oh, something's going on when I turn it off. I get a distorted sound going through. Let me just try dropping the voltage on that. It's trying. It's really trying. Okay, we're a little closer. Just a note, it's now working in bypass. Which on the Roland's, on the Boss pedals, sorry, is a buffered output. So I'm tracing it through the circuit. That means the bypass at least is running, but the effect on is not working. Okay, progress. Do you hear that? It's working. So after going back and forth with the old pedal, getting confused about some signals going in and out of op amps, and then just going back to it and fiddling with the controls, it's running. It was distorting because one of the resonance controls was, well, the resonance control was turned right up. That's the rate control. That works. It bloody works. Right, what next? Let's try and get it into the decent case. Ground the socket and everything properly. Get it back together and see where to go from there. Just a quick one because the battery's low. I've soldered that EMI filter capacitor back on. I think that was bodged because I think someone tried to solder it and bridged something somewhere. I've just put that back on, metered it out, and it's now fine. So I'd rather it be there. I did put a little bit of super glue just where this wire comes through this hole here, so it's as secure as it can be. I mean, once it's all in, it's not going to move. And going back to the video I did on the previous pedal, I mentioned this bit of insulation plastic was really important. This was missing from this pedal, so it's a good job I kept it off the old one, because I'm also going to use the screws and the back plate as well, just because the back plate, although it did come with the back plate that was with it, it didn't have the label on. At least it's all sort of complete now if I do it like that. So I'm going to bob some screws back in this. These top corner ones can be a little bit awkward because they've got those ground tabs underneath, and they can kind of get in the way a bit sometimes and almost cause you to cross thread the screws, so just have to feel your way through it really. So the original 2016 battery that came with it is now powering it. Seems to go so far. Let's again put some signal in, and monitor out. The amp on. Sounds like it's going to me. There we go. That's actually ground hum. That's some resonance. That appears to work. That sounds even better. I'm going to call that good. That's good enough for me. I'm quite happy to have that in the studio and run that. Now, Brucey bonus. The seller, when I bought this, sent me a message straight away. I replied straight away and explained that I was buying the PH-3 to hopefully, between that one and a broken one I've got, get something up and running by cobbling bits together between the two, which I've kind of done. And he replied straight away and said, "Oh, brilliant, I've got some other broken pedal bits, I'll throw them in." Not only did he just throw me in some parts, but he threw me in an entire other pedal, which I only found out about when I got the package and opened it. This looks to be probably about a 1990. It's branded as Vision, but it looks to be exactly the same as that Columbus delay pedal. It's not a delay. It's I think it might actually be. Looking inside, again, it's in pieces. There's a 4558 op-amp chip inside there, and what commonly uses those is the Tube Screamers. It might be a little Tube Screamer clone, but it looks like it's made in the same factory as that little Columbus pedal that I repaired. I actually repaired two of them earlier back on the channel. Now we've got a typical sort of mess going on with a battery clip, similar to what we had on that other one I repaired actually, so that can straight away go. I was going to do a repair on this one today, but I'm kind of running out of time a little bit today, so I think I'll save this for another time. It might well work for all I know, I don't know. Yeah, I think I'll save this one for another time and probably do a separate video on this one. But yeah, that's something to play with in the future. And really cool that he threw that in. Really nice of him. So, but the goal of this video was to get this going, and we got there in the end. So I hope that was of some use or some entertainment to someone, and thank you for watching.